Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Jen and I'm here every week to give you important transits that are happening in the sky, and I like to weave in a little bit of psychology research on the transits and how they correlate, and then I usually close with some sort of spell or ritual or just something that you can do to really anchor in the energy of the week. This week, I'm not going to tell you that it's the most important week of the year, but I do want to say pay attention, because the combination of what's happening in the sky right now and what's about to shift, it's the kind of thing that rewards people who are intentional and quietly passes by the people who aren't. Here's the setup. Every single planet is direct right now, so nothing is in retrograde, nothing is asking you to slow down or revisit or pause or wait. The friction that's been sitting in the background of your decisions, it's completely gone. Thank God. And that's important to mention because we haven't had this kind of unobstructed forward momentum and movement all year long. At the same time, we are in the last full week of the Pisces Stellium. So Mercury, Mars, and the North Node are all still in Pisces, and that's water. That is intuition, feeling. It is that stuff that you kind of sense before you know it's happening or you know how to describe it or articulate it. But everything is slowly shifting into Aries. And if Pisces season was kind of like floating in warm water, which it wasn't for me because I have a lot of Pisces and a lot of Virgo. But if it was like floating in warm water for you, Aries is going to be like biting a raw jalapeno. So the texture of life is about to really change for all of us. And this week, I would say, is a very sweet spot before it does. So the invitation this week is very specific. It's not, let's journal about our feelings. It's about really having the conversation, making the commitment. Commitment is a big word this week. Astrology doesn't do the work for you, right? It just shows you when the conditions are right. And right now, the conditions are right. But a perfect week of transits with no actions is just a week that passes by. Let's talk about what's happening. So let's start off with what is still here before it is gone. Right now in Pisces, we have Mercury, Mars, and the North Node all traveling together. That's a stellium, so 3 or more planets in the same sign, creating kind of one concentrated field of energy. And in Pisces, that energy is about what you feel, the conversation that's been, living in your chest, the direction that kind of keeps surfacing in your dreams, that thing you know you need to do, but you haven't quite said it out loud yet. Mercury just stationed direct on March 20th, yay! And if the last few weeks kind of felt like you're speaking through wet concrete, the words are just not landing, the conversations are going sideways, ideas are stuck somewhere between your brain and your mouth, that is all lifting, and the channel is now open again. Mars is the action planet, and in Pisces, Mars doesn't push forward, it actually pulls. So it's less about I'm going to fight for this and more about I'm being drawn towards this whether I understand it or not. And the North Node sitting right there with both of them is just this piece that makes it very fated. The North Node in astrology represents the direction your soul is being called towards. It's not necessarily comfortable or familiar, but it is where growth lives. So this stellium is asking, what have you been sensing but not saying? What conversations keep getting postponed? I spoke about this last week about acknowledging what has already changed in you, and maybe that is something that you're sensing and still trying to wrap your mind around. And here's where I want to bring in some of the research, because there is a psychologist at NYU named Peter Goldwitzer who has spent decades studying the difference between what people want and what they actually do. Most of us walk around with a goal intention. I want to have this conversation. I want to reach out to this person this week. I really do need to make a decision on this thing. And we really mean it. I do this all the time. We really truly have the intention to do it. But goal Witzers found that goal intention alone, even if it's a strong one, isn't enough. What actually moves the needle forward between wanting and doing is something he calls an implementation intention, an if-then plan. Not, I want to do this, but when this specific situation arises, I will do this specific thing. The difference in the outcome is not small either. So across 94 studies, people who formed implementation intentions were significantly more likely to follow through on a difficult goal than people who only held that goal intention. The studies found difficult goals were completed 3 times more often when people got specific about the when, where, and how. 3 times more often. That is huge. So the Pisces Stellium is giving you the feeling, the pull and the draw towards something, the signal, the acknowledgement maybe. Mercury direct is giving you that language back, but Goldwitzer is telling you that the feeling isn't going to be enough. You have to name the moment. Not, I'll have the conversation soon. When will you have the conversation? Where are you going to have the conversation? What is the first thing you're going to say in the conversation? Those questions need to be answered and mapped out clearly. This is the last full week of this stellium, so the water is still here. Use it while it's soft enough for you to move through. On March 25th, the sun meets Saturn at 5 degrees Aries, and this one is worth pausing on. The sun in astrology is your identity, who you are, how you show up, the light that you're putting out into the world. And Saturn is the planet of structure and discipline, long-term consequence, karma. And it's the planet that's going to ask, are you actually building something or are you just thinking about it? And we've talked about this a lot, especially in my channel, because I honestly love tracking Saturn transits. Saturn gets a bad rep, but Saturn really rewards people who do the work. And most of us here that are watching this have a level of self-awareness where we know what we need to do. You know what I mean? So when these 2 planets meet up in Aries, the sign of self, the sign of initiation, it's a moment where your identity and your commitment shake hands. Who are you going to decide to be? And what are you willing to build in service of that? I wouldn't say this is a soft transit, but I don't think it's a harsh one either. It's just very helpful. We can really start to build out these goals in real time. No more just dreaming about them. And this is where I want to bring in Hal Hertzfield, another psychologist and professor who has spent over a decade researching something that I think completely reframes what this transit is asking of you. Hertzfield's research found something that stops me every single time I think about it. When people think about their future selves, the person that they'll be in 5 or 10 or 20 years, their brain actually processes that future person the same way it would process a complete stranger. Not you, someone else. Someone you don't really know, someone you're not particularly loyal to, and honestly, don't feel responsible for. Isn't that weird? I think that's so weird. But that's why it is so easy to put things off, to say, future me will just figure that out. To delay the commitment, the conversation, the first step, because neurologically the future self isn't quite you yet. So who cares, right? But here's what his research also found. When people strengthen that felt connection to their future self, everything starts to change. The decisions they make today get significantly better. They act with more integrity, more patience for themselves, more intention goes behind their actions, because suddenly the future self isn't just a stranger. The future you is someone you actually care about. So Sun conjunct Saturn in Aries is that moment. Your present self and your future self are in the same room right now. Saturn is asking you to make the commitment, not just a vague idea of who you might want to become, but a specific direction, a specific build, something that you're willing to put real structure and effort behind. And what does that version of you looking back on this week need to decide and commit to? That's the question. Mars is still in Pisces, moving slowly towards Aries, and Jupiter's in Cancer still and is now direct since March 10th. And right now, these two are forming a trine. That is a 120-degree angle, one of the most flowing aspects in astrology. Two planets in water signs talking to each other easily with no friction and no resistance, just momentum. Mars is your drive, it's your desire, the part of you that wants to move towards things. And Jupiter is expansion and opportunity, the part of the sky that says yes and actually means it. So when these two are in conversation like this, and with every single planet direct on top of it, what you're working with is a rare kind of energetic cooperation. Nothing is pulling against you right now. Nothing is retrograde. Nothing is stuck. Nothing is asking you to wait. And I want to be honest with something here because I think this is really important as well. This kind of alignment doesn't mean things are going to be naturally easy. It just means that the conditions are as clear as they are going to get. And there's a difference with that. The work is still yours to do, right? But the resistance that usually makes starting something new so hard, that is not here right now. Which brings me back to the research, because Gultwitzer's work doesn't just apply to the planning stage, it also speaks directly to the moment of initiation, the first move that you make. And what the research consistently shows is that starting is the single biggest predictor of completion. Not the motivation, not the confidence, not having everything, figured out, the actual starting. So getting started is where most people stall. Not because they don't want to do the thing, but because between intention and the first action is where doubt lives. And Gultwitzer found that people who closed that gap the fastest were the ones who had already decided in advance, specifically on what their first move was going to be. Not, I'll start when I feel ready, but on Tuesday at 10 a.m., I'm sending the email. Or this week on Thursday, I'm making that call. The decision about when and how to start has already been made before the moment arrives. Mars trine Jupiter with all the planets direct is that Tuesday at 10 a.m., the moment you have already decided on, the first move you already know you need to make. So I want to ask you directly, what is the one thing that you've been circling? The project, the conversation, the pitch, the application, the relationship, the breakup, the creative work. What is the specific first step? Because this window, this week, every planet direct, Mars and Jupiter in flow, it doesn't just reassemble itself next month. The runway is clear right now this week, and the research says that people who move when conditions are right are not necessarily the people who feel the most confident. They're the people who have already decided what they were going to do when the moment came. The moment is now. It really is. Saturday, March 28th, Saturn at 5 degrees Aries is going to sextile Pluto at 5 degrees Aquarius. I want to give this one the space it deserves. Not because I'm going to hype it up, well, I might, but because the facts speak for themselves. The aspect is exact only once. It will not repeat itself. Saturn and Pluto will not form this sextile again in our lifetime due to the way that the cycles interact with each other. What happens in the sky on March 28th is a one-time configuration. Saturn in Aries is structure, meeting, initiation. It is the discipline to actually build the thing you said you were going to build. Pluto in Aquarius is deep systemic transformation. The kind that doesn't just change the surface of something, but changes its foundation. And a sextile is a cooperative aspect. So these two planets are not fighting with each other. Nothing is really fighting in the sky right now. It feels so lovely. They're working together. And what that means practically is this: the structures you put into place this week, the commitments, the big word, the commitments you make, the direction you choose, they have Pluto's backing. And Pluto doesn't do surface level. What gets built under this aspect has roots. Saturn Sextile Pluto is the aspect of endurance and focused determination. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It is the kind of energy that filters out the noise and locks onto what actually matters. Dedication runs high under this transit. Clarity about purpose runs high. And the unnecessary, the distractions or the half commitments or the things that you've been doing out of habit, rather than intention, start falling away on their own. And this brings me back to Hall Hertzfeld, because his research has one more piece that I think lands differently when you understand what this transit is asking. We already talked about how your brain processes your future self like a stranger, but Hertzfeld also studies what happens when you write a letter, not to your future self, but from your future self, back to you right now in this moment. And what he found is that this reversal, what he calls reverse time travel, had an even stronger effect on present behavior than writing forward. When people wrote as their future self, looking back at this moment, they made better decisions. They acted with more intention. They were less likely to let the moment pass them by. Because suddenly the question isn't, what do I want someday? It is, what does this person I'm becoming need me to do right now? Do you see the difference? Saturn Sextile Pluto is that question made cosmic. The version of you that exists 5-10 years from now, the one who built something real, who had that conversation, who took the first step. During the week, every planet is direct. That version of you is looking back at this Saturday. What are they grateful you did? Okay, that's all I wanted to mention for this week, so let's talk about a ritual that we can do. This one comes directly from Hertzfeld's research, and it takes maybe 10 minutes. So no supplies needed, just you and something to write with, and the willingness to sit with yourself. Like I mentioned, he called it reverse time travel. Instead of writing a letter to your future self, which most people do, you're going to write a letter from your future self back to you right now this week. So close your eyes for a second and locate the version of you that's 5-10 years out right now. The one who did the thing, who had the conversation and really truly made that commitment this week. That version of you exists. They made it through this week with the intention. Now write as them to yourself today. What do they want you to know? What do they need you to hear right now that maybe you're not letting yourself hear? What did they do this week that changed the whole trajectory of your life? What are they grateful for that you didn't talk yourself out of? It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be perfect. Hertzfeld's research found that even a brief exercise like this shifts the decisions people make in the present because it makes the future self real, specific, and something worth making decisions and choices for. So write the letter and then read it back to yourself out loud. And that's it. That's the ritual. Simple, research backed, and if you actually do it, will probably be quietly one of the most powerful things you can do this week with this energy. Trust me on it. Pisces Stellium coming to a close soon. Get specific about what you've been sensing and say it out loud. Really start to acknowledge it. Sun conjunct Saturn on the 25th. Make that commitment. Shake hands with the person you're becoming. Mars trine Jupiter, and with every planet direct this week, I'm going to mention it over and over. Take the first step, the one you already know you need to take. And Saturn Sextile Pluto on the 28th, one time, no repeat. So build something that lasts. Build your legacy. Astrology gave you the map. Goldwitzer told you to get specific. Hirschfield told you your future self is watching you. The window is real and it is open right now, my friends. Okay, I'll see you next week.